The new Gibson RD Custom is finally here. Welcome back, Troglodytes, to your daily dose guitar information, the Trogly's Guitar Show. First things first, shout out to Martin. Thank you for new guitar daying one of these. I'm really excited to check it out. First off, that is a big chunky case. It reminds me of a Firebird. To be honest, it wouldn't even surprise me if it's the same one, but hey, we'll find out. The RD is back. Wow. I like this interior. It's got this interesting additional neck block support right there that's a slightly different color. Like, I was thinking maybe it'd be a different texture. I mean, this is a lot softer, but who cares about the case, right? Let's talk about the guitar. First, anyway. The Gibson RD was first introduced in the late 70s, around 1977. The guitars initially came out in 3 different versions, a custom, artist, and a standard. 2 of those 3 had active Moog electronics, and there were also some bass offerings. However, the early years featured a 25.5-inch scale, and that made these popular later on in their life for detuning chuggy guys. They liked that. And on almost every RD reissue since then, Gibson never gave them that scale. They always went for the 24 3/4. So with this new RD custom model, they're trying to appeal to the fans as well as fill a gap in the custom shop of having a 25.5-inch scale. Now, that doesn't mean that we haven't had it before, like the Dave Mustaine Custom Shop Flying Vs. They're also that. However, they're not regular production. That was a limited edition that you can't buy from them anymore. So this one is joining the lineup of the Customs, which consists of the SG, the Explorer, Les Paul, and Flying V, which are typically offered in these black tuxedo finishes as well as some custom colors. They even have a Firebird. Those ones are set neck though. So a little bit different from tradition, but not all that different from the new USA Platypus. But here's our new one within the family. And I've got to say, I was a little bit worried. I didn't know how this was going to feel. I saw somebody say it felt giant, but really, it feels smaller than the older RDs, because you got to remember, we don't have all these super comfort rounded edges, and we're making these things out of mahogany instead of maple, so it's really not even that heavy. This particular example, anyway. It really does just remind me of a slightly rounded off Explorer, but perhaps with a little bit more neck. And it might just be me, but the body almost seems a little bit slimmer. Like, we still have this comfort cut back here, so that's nice. I would say it's comfortable having that bound top. I was really scared the ergonomics of this model were going to be compromised by that. So now we just have the mild confusion of calling this the RD Custom when an RD Custom already exists in a way different format. But these are being offered brand new for $5,799, which makes it about 2 times more expensive than the vintage originals. However, it's really nothing like the vintage originals. In fact, it's not even worth comparing them. But over on the Workbench, I'll point a few things out. Because again, mahogany construction versus the maple construction, ebony fretboard, mother of pearl block inlays. We've got binding on the neck this time. The early RD artists did not. However, later produced ones did. But it's the first time we've seen it dressed up like a Les Paul Custom. Of course, me just saying, hey, it's not as bad as I thought doesn't really tell you anything. So let's compare it to all the other main Gibson core models. A Les Paul Custom, you can see it's going to stick out a little bit farther on the left and right. And it's just a little bit longer. That becomes very apparent when you put them on a stand. That one sits a whole lot lower. And now as compared to an SG, it has a very similar thickness to it. But now moving on to the big boys, the Flying V takes up a very similar amount of space. Although the 70s one, I would argue, is a little bit thinner than it. But this is actually really helpful to see side by side, because I always thought these were just kind of rounded off Explorers with a bit of Firebird mixed in. But you can see just how much pointier an Explorer is, not only up here, but also down there. However, the RD still stretches just about as far as an Explorer would normally go. But you also have the 6 on a side versus the 3 and 3 headstock style. I would say their thicknesses are about the same. I'm not sure why my mind always goes to sawn off Explorer, because it's basically just a Firebird. The horn stretches up just about the same. It's got its little jute over here, just a little bit more shortened now. It evolves a little bit more Explorer-like right here. By coming a little farther out, we get rid of the neck through design, and then we really round off this corner. So my ultimate suggestion is, if you really like a reverse Firebird, but you wish it had a little bit more Explorer elements, that's pretty much exactly what the RD is in its own unique way. just with the 3 on a side headstock. And just for fun, if you're always curious what a lefty Gibson RD would look like, it'd be similar to your non-reverse Firebird. But you can see how this one's just a little bit more outstretched than that, whereas this guy's a little bit more compact. But fun to see side by side. So you tell me, what body shape do you prefer of the Gibson land of offerings? I'm certainly lucky to be able to compare it to pretty much one of the big main models. We could go on for days here with like the Gibson Victory, etc., but hopefully this gives you an idea of what to expect if you've never had an RD before. But besides just the guitar for that, you also get the case that we were looking at earlier. Let's just say, if they start selling these things separately and you want to put them in for your vintage RDs, so far, yeah, I think this is a really solid case. I mean, look at the fit on this. It hardly moves at all, but it's not like so stiff you can't get the thing in there. And tons of headstock clearance. Even the interior smells different than usual. If Gibson's stepping up their case game with their manufacturers, I'm all for it. This is very impressive. And I'm not usually all that impressed. Curious who made it. I'm surprised, GWW in Costa Rica. But other than that, we've got our Gibson app advertisement, small warranty information, and pre-packed checklist combo. Some fancy case keys in here, silica packet, and being a custom shop model, we do have an official COA, labeled as RD Custom. This was the 21st guitar made in 2025. That's cool. So at launch, we only have this black ebony finish. But we'll have to see if the mod collection has any fun with it or if we get a custom color series like the other ones. But to learn more about this particular one, let's go ahead and throw it over onto the Workbench to document its parts and specs and then get to a playing sample. If you were curious if they were hiding anything under that pickguard, nope, nothing. It's kind of a bare, naked guitar. I can't wait to see the mod collection do crazy stuff with these. Or hopefully one day we might get a flame top version, because we've seen them explore around with the other custom series with them, because that would even bring back some of the original mapleness to these. But as of right now, it looks like they're just doing slabs of mahogany here, because you can actually see in areas like right here, the mahogany wood grain poking through from the lacquer sink. But our stock pickups are the same as the others. The standard 490R in the neck and 498T in the bridge. And those give us readings of 13.77 k ohms in the bridge, so nice and hot. Then you mellow it out to 774 in the neck, and the middle position, just for fun, 495. As far as the cavity routes, here's what the neck position looks like. Now, do you make the argument that it's a short neck tenon, or is it still long neck? Because this really does sink into the body quite far. Gibson's making the call it's a long tenon on the spec sheet, so just not the kind you see. That's kind of funny. Then our bridge pickup route, nothing too fancy going on here. Just your regular stuff. But in case you missed it, they do have a drill run going straight through here. So that's how your wires are being fed through the body. But speaking of our pickguard, I wonder what a white one would look like. Here's a quick little mock-up just for fun. But this pickguard is 4-ply and it's like extra thick. That last white layer is like twice as thick as all the other ones. But now bridge and tailpiece time. We've got a Nashville style bridge, which is correct for an RD, and it's full weight and PW branded, and it has the solid posts, so you have to utilize your thumb wheels, and it's mounted traditionally with a post in the body. And we've got a full weight golden tailpiece, the regular style that Gibson uses. As far as our control layout on our new one, through a toggle switch, no fancy toggles or anything. That would have been such a cool callback to the Artist series though, just to have a couple of them for like in and out of phase, coil splitting, and coil tapping. But here we can take a closer look at our 7-ply binding along our top. And then let's go ahead and grab our dimensions here. So first upper bout to over here, I measure 11¼ inches. As far as the lower bout to its most extreme point, it's just shy of 15 inches. And now from the heel of the body to the very bottom, it's about 19¼ but there is a little bit of a longer jut, so let's call it 19½. And it's roughly 1.5 inches thick. But something that's kind of weird is our comfort cut actually comes at an angle right here. It still feels like a normal ridge rather than just completely rounded over. So if you were just feeling this with your finger, I don't even know if you would realize there's a comfort cut there. You can kind of see what I'm talking about just by looking at the side profile. Fairly confident that's different from the originals. But overall, I would say those dimensions seem familiar to what I see online as the listed specs. Just with some mild changes that we already talked about, like this isn't all rounded over as well. With the lacquer sink that we were talking about earlier, I was curious if I could actually see how many pieces the body is made out of. And I don't see a center seam. That doesn't mean it's not there. It could show up in the future. But I suppose there might be a small chance that it could also be a one-piece body. That seems like a very low chance, but maybe it would help make up for some of the price. But moving on from the mahogany body, we've got the mahogany neck with the ebony fretboard and our mother of pearl block inlays, all bound and looking nice, super tuxedo-ified. I do have to compliment the custom shop. That's a really smooth feeling fretboard. And there you go. Gibson's not lying. It is a 25.5-inch scale length with 12-inch fretboard radius. But I measure 1.69 inches at the nut, about 2.08 by the 12, 0.82 first fret neck depth, and 0.96 by the 12. Here's that neck profile at the first fret and the 12th fret. Very rounded. But I would personally categorize it as a medium to medium thin territory. Not blade thin like an SG, not overly chunky like an R7, R8, or even some of the Explorer Customs. So that could be something else that this one has going for it over an Explorer Custom or Firebird Custom, besides just the extended scale. And now we can move on to the face of the headstock. We've got 5-ply binding up here with our mother of pearl Gibson logo, as well as our custom emblem, which is new for this model, and our truss rod's in good shape and only features a blank truss rod cover. But now it's all strung up, ready to rock and roll, but pay special attention here. 2 volumes, 2 tones. There's nothing crazy going on here, right? However, you flip it over to the back, they still gave it the same giant control plate. So that makes me think either we're going to see something strange in here or Gibson is planning for the future. They are going to put a burst driver circuit in one of these or some inbuilt tremolo or reverb. Who knows? But I find it strange that this is just so obnoxiously big unless they're just doing a throwback to the original custom model. Or maybe it's just their attempt at putting some weight relief into this giant mahogany body. Let's find out our answer together. That is certainly not what I was expecting under here. It really reminds me of an SG's route, so they just planed that down to put that over, but it does look like they're planning something over here. Or maybe they were thinking, well, do we put the toggle switch over here, or do we put the output jack on the front? If this sells well, I'd be curious if we see another model that happens to have a coil split switch or something. Or maybe they left it there so you could put it in if you wanted to. Otherwise, it's just an L bracket toggle switch like you find on SGs, and your regular Gibson branded pots with ceramic disc capacitors. That's another good spot to see some of the mahogany wood grain that would show through on the top. Because without this jut right there, they could have really made that plate smaller. But as far as the rest of the body, nothing too notable. Once again, we can see our comfort cut. But look at it from the edge, and you can see what I was talking about earlier. It still has a ledge to it right there, so it's not completely rounded over. I've always kind of liked having a little bit of a ledge. I could see how somebody would think that might be a bad thing. But we've got a strap button at the bottom, and one at the heel of the neck. Here's what the neck join area looks like on one of these new ones. And then we can run up the back side of the neck. It's just more ebony finish, shows fingerprints, scratches. But there's our Gibson custom decal and our regular Grover tuners, and pay special attention to our serial number. It appears Gibson might have a new set of stampers because that's a slightly different font for 2025. We saw that in the mod collection this previous week. But this was the 21st 2025 guitar, so one of the early ones. That's not the 21st RD custom made. That's out of all the models in the custom shop that utilizes the CS year production number stylings, this one happened to be 21. But all said and done, how much do you think this big mahogany beast weighs? Not too bad. 8.5 pounds. 8 pounds, 8 ounces. Let's go ahead, plug it in, and hear how this new one sounds. First off, on a strap, I'd say it's pretty comfortable. Not overly heavy, but still has a good chunk to it. Not neck divey and by any means. You don't have any banjo tuners or anything. That could be a benefit to many of Firebirds. But I think on a strap, what it most reminds me of is a non-reverse Firebird. The 498T's got a lot of growl to it. Whereas that neck position's a little bit more mellow. But it gives that middle position just a little bit more nastiness. But don't forget, you can always tame it by rolling down your volume. So here it is normally. Take it down to about 7.5. So there we go, the new RD Custom. Thank you, Martin, for sharing your new guitar so we could all check it out. What are my final thoughts and opinions of it? I feel like this is priced at a point where it doesn't necessarily make the original RD guys happy, but if they want something similar but different, they could jump up to one of these to have basically a Les Paul Custom in a brand new format just without a maple top. I think this will more so appeal to people who are just shopping for a brand new Gibson in general, because when you're not comparing this to the prices of the vintage originals, it makes a lot more sense because it's like, oh yeah, it's just the same as most of those other customs. Maybe I would like to try the 25.5-inch scale. So I think it's great that Gibson brought this back. It's certainly not going to be for everybody, but to be honest, I wasn't really having that great of a time playing this until I'd started to try some alternate tunings. And even with the stock 10 gauge strings, I mean, that's C. Usually you need at least something a little heavier for that. It wasn't too bad, so keep that in mind. This demo would have been a lot better if that's what you're going to use this guitar with and set it up with heavier strings. Because in that aspect, yes, this thing is a lot of fun. And if you've never tried an RD out and you love Firebirds, and maybe even a little bit of Explorer, maybe give it a shot. But alright, Troglodytes, I hope you learned something, and we'll catch you tomorrow on the next one. Take care.